On this edition of the Random Podcast, I will be discussing 3 sports articles that I've recently read online. How could Major League Baseball, the National Basketball Association, and the National Hockey League restart everything once the coronavirus pandemic ends? Well, let's find out. Hello everyone, and welcome to the 3rd episode of the Random Podcast. I am your host, Andy Pollock, and let's put the startup sound. There we go, alright. So, quickly want to mention, the podcast is sponsored by the Anchor app. Learn how to make your own podcast by using the Anchor app by going to the Apple App Store or the Google Play Android Store. So this first part, we're going to discuss how Major League Baseball is considering reopening everything. How could we have the start of the 2020 season, given the circumstance of the coronavirus pandemic? Well, I'm going to cite my sources so that way you know where I'm reading them from. Bob Nightingale, on April 10th, posted an article on usatoday.com that said MLB was considering a radical realignment for the 2020 season and was considering using spring training sites in Arizona and Florida with no spectators. This would be the Grapefruit League in Florida and the Cactus League in Arizona. So I'll get into this article right now. The ad... Oh, there's an ad. My bad. Why am I saying there's an ad? Okay. Let's just get here. Okay. This was an idea. It said they were discussing plans that would eliminate the traditional American and National League for the 2020 season. This was a high-ranking official that told USA Today Sports and realign all 6 divisions for an abbreviated season. This is only a proposal. One other proposal was claiming that they were going to have neutral sites and have no spectators. They were going to use players to put them in the stands, keep them 6 feet apart, and keep the coaches apart, and socially distance and use the CDC guidelines. So, this Arizona and Florida idea goes on to say that the plan would have all 30 teams returning to their spring training sites in Florida and Arizona. They would play regular season games only in those 2 states and without spectators in an effort to reduce travel and minimize risk in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. The divisions would be realigned based on the geography of their spring training homes. The plan would allow teams to return to the comforts of their spring training sites for 3 weeks of extra spring training, which would also include exhibition games before opening the regular season and playing a schedule with wholly different divisional opponents. They have a realignment structure. Here would how the Grapefruit League would work. In the North Division, you would have the New York Yankees, the Philadelphia Phillies, Toronto Blue Jays, Detroit Tigers, and the Pittsburgh Pirates. In the South Division, you would have the Boston Red Sox, Minnesota Twins, Atlanta Braves, Tampa Bay Rays, and the Baltimore Orioles. In the Eastern Division, you would have the Washington Nationals, Houston Astros, New York Mets, St. Louis Cardinals, and Miami Marlins. So those would be all the Florida teams playing in the Grapefruit League. In the Arizona Cactus League, it would be the Chicago Cubs, San Francisco Giants, Arizona Diamondbacks, Colorado Rockies, and Oakland Athletics. In the Western Division, you would have the Los Angeles Dodgers, Chicago White Sox, Cincinnati Reds, Cleveland Indians, and the Los Angeles Angels, or as I like to call them, the Anaheim Angels. In the Northwestern Division, and this is where everything wraps up, of course, you would have the Milwaukee Brewers, San Diego Padres, Seattle Mariners, Texas Rangers, and the Kansas City Royals. So, this idea, I think, could work because, look at it this way. You are in a place that you're familiar with. If you are a player over the years, you got used to your spring training sites, and let's say under the circumstances, you could have games in Arizona, games in Florida, for the example we're using here, and you could have the players and the coaches be in the stands. They don't have to be in the dugout, because why would they want to be in the dugout? Because they're close. They're in a close proximity of each other, and they're not socially distancing. So, honestly, the way I look at it, you have a situation where it could work, and it may not work. I mean, just to say it's not going to work may not work. And if it does work, then maybe we hit a home run with this, literally. This is how it could work out. Looking at where you could have this scenario work, and then it also would work out for this option. Cactus League in Arizona gives more flexibility if all the teams are within a drawer's drive of each other. Florida, teams are spread throughout the state, presents a bigger challenge, and players, official, and support staff will need to be quarantined, which has not been determined. Earlier this week, following a report by ESPN, MLB was considering having discussions about playing the season exclusively in Arizona. The Arizona-Florida plan, which has several advantages, includes allowing teams to establish home bases with facilities that are familiar with. There will also be 26 ballparks available to be used, including 3 Major League Dome stadiums, Tropicana Field in St. Petersburg, Marlins Park in Miami, and Chase Field in Arizona. As far as TV, you could have a captive audience throughout the entire day. Games in Florida could begin at 11 a.m. Eastern and have games in prime time for East Coast teams and their fans. The time slots would still permit West Coast teams to play prime time games in Arizona. Baseball, even with the realignment, could still get 12 games apiece against their new divisional opponents and 6 games apiece against other teams in the state. There would at least be one doubleheader a night when all teams are scheduled to play because of the odd number of teams in each state. The DH would likely be the universally implemented as well. There could still be divisional winners and wildcard winners, perhaps adding 2 more wildcard teams to each league, or even going to a postseason tournament in the fall. We could assume maybe MLB could look into neutral sites where you could do an indoor stadium like Tampa, Miami, Arizona. I think Houston's domed. Yeah, Houston would be an option. Then you have Toronto, which is a dome stadium. So that's another option right there. But you could also have LA as an option, because you could use Anaheim or Los Angeles, because lately in the fall, and they seem to get warm weather. You could do Texas. They have the new ballpark in Arlington for the Texas Rangers. And as I mentioned, with the Astros, they have an indoor stadium. So there are options that should be looked into if you are going to have here's what it said. It would use dome stadiums in late November. So we could be talking about a scenario where you could have, and I hate to say this, the NFL and Major League Baseball on Thanksgiving Day. which who would think that could be possible? But it could be possible given our current world and our current circumstances that we're trying to deal with right now. Okay, again, nothing has been decided. MLB will continue to wait until being advised by health and government officials that it is safe to start the season, holding out hope the teams could return to their major league cities, even with spectators. Well, I still would hope spectators would be part of the experience if everything works out the way it's supposed to. And then, given the circumstance, you could honestly just say, look, we'll go with this plan, and we'll see how it ends up. But at the end of the day, as a fan, again, I only go to one ball game a year anyway. I mean, I would love to be in the ballpark. You know, I would love to see Pete Alonso again at Citi Field this year. But honestly, I don't know how that's going to work out. I really don't know if I'm even going to be allowed to go to Flushing, go with my former supervisor from work, who retired last year. We're supposed to go this season. I kept telling her, look, I want to go to Citi Field to see Pete Alonso and get the pastrami sandwich, which, by the way, if we ever are allowed back in Citi Field or any other stadium in general, please try the pastrami sandwich at Citi Field. It is that good, especially with the rye bread. The rest of the article says they'll look into exploring all options, knowing that anything and everything is possible for a season like no other. And you cannot give up on baseball, because look at two sports that produce the most revenue in this country. And I always tell people this. It's baseball and then football. Baseball, if they don't play a season this year, would be absolutely catastrophic economically. Because you are supposed to have games played every day. Every day. Yeah, sure. Each team gets an off day. But most cases during the season, if your team's not playing and you have MLB TV like I do, you want to at least want to see the out-of-market games. So, beneficially, the way I look at this, you know, I would love to hear John Sterling and Susan Wallman call Yankee games on the radio again, or hear Gary Cohen say, "It's out of here!" on the SNY call for the Mets, or Gary Thorne for Masson and the Orioles saying, "Good boy, home run!" I mean, I would love to hear that. I would absolutely. Oh, the guy in Chicago, the White Sox guy, you can put it on the board. Yes. Hope he's still broadcasting, but or the Giants broadcasters, but you can't give up on baseball. And even Tony La Russa wants to see baseball come back. So if you hear that Tony La Russa wants baseball back, there's a possibility. So it's only April. We could have a decision made in May or June, which I hope there is. And right now it's up to the feds to make a decision on what they're going to do. And I'll get into more of the NBA and NHL in just a second. If the feds are saying, you know, we can let you do this, then we'll let you do this. It's all up to the federal government. It's all up to state governments too. That they'll say, look, you guys can play. You can go play ball. I have a good feeling that we are going to get baseball back. I've told everybody this, that I've had a feeling that MLB was going to be the first sport to come back. There's so much money. It's not like the NBA and the NHL where, yeah, there's money involved in that too, but MLB gets the most profit. So does the NFL. So this is a good idea. I like it. You can always reach out to me on Twitter at Andy's Randomness. Tell me how you feel about this idea. So the way I view it, it's a good idea. If they're going to socially distance, I'm all in for that. As long as you're socially distancing, you're in the stands, you're keeping players away from each other, then that's fine. I have no problem with that. So, Rob Manfred, keep exploring your options, because we want to see baseball back. Now let's get into the NBA, and this is an article from SBNation.com written by Ricky O'Donnell back on April 7th. How would the NBA reopen the 2019-2020 season? And we'll wrap this up with hockey, of course, because I will get into how disappointed I was not going to the last game of the regular season 2 weeks ago. I'll get into that later on. So, let's get into this. We obviously know the NBA was the first major sports league to shut down all operations after Rudy Gobert on March 11 tested positive for coronavirus during a game against the Oklahoma City Thunder. So, we know the situation, what happened. The game was supposed to tip off. They canceled it. Every other sports league canceled or postponed play. We knew March Madness didn't happen. The Masters was postponed. And, of course, the start of MLB. Most states have shelter-in-place provisions. Of course, we know about public gatherings. Large crowds are banned. Bars and restaurants are closed. Air traffic is minimal, including vehicular traffic, for that matter. And, of course, the trending topic on Twitter each and every day has always been social distancing. Commissioner Adam Silver has still not given up hope on resuming the season. The league is keeping a close eye on the Chinese Basketball Association, which planned to return this week before being delayed another month. So, China could potentially reopen their season next month, because Wuhan, where the virus started, has lifted their social distancing restrictions. They are lifting it slowly. So, the NBA could look into MLB and figure out if MLB is reopening, then maybe we can do this. First things first, you need rapid response testing. And this has been something that Dr. Anthony Fauci and Governor Andrew Cuomo in New York have always kept talking about in the past couple of days. There needs to be rapid response testing for coronavirus, which would be a major first step towards returning to play. Now, we need the rapid responses to potentially reopen everything. And the way it could work, you have the rapid testing, and there's a possibility more rapid testing, if the FDA approves a scenario, you could see life before the virus resume, aka have the NBA come back. So, the country would be upset if the NBA had the rapid testing first, and then every other American who has symptoms of coronavirus could obviously say, look, we are just waiting for our test, and all of a sudden, the NBA players are getting it. Why can't we get it? Can the NBA really pull this off and possibly say we have the test, we can put our players back on the court? Well, only time will tell that situation. A central location. Now, the NBA could use a host city. This is similar to what I mentioned with Major League Baseball. You could have 30 teams. All 30 teams. So here's the thing: you have Arizona and Florida. and play games in empty stadiums. Las Vegas could make sense because the Summer League for the NBA is held in Las Vegas. Also, here's something interesting, and I like this idea. Not Atlantic City, because Atlantic City has been brought up, but the Bahamas. Now, the Bahamas are islands. So, is it possible you could have arenas available and you could play in the Bahamas? I wouldn't have a problem with that. You could put them on an island. The UFC was even thinking about that. Well, you have empty arenas, but it's going to be a nightmare to pull off. Now, how would we go back to everything? Would we restart everything from March 11th? Well, yes. So, one scenario could be that you could, in theory, shorten the playoffs to 5 games. And I honestly do miss the first round being 5 games, because do you really need the first round of the NBA playoffs being that long? It's not like, see, with hockey, it's different. You want to see 7 games. You want to see the same team playing 7 games because they're knowing each other over time. They're taking the course. Now, another idea was Brooklyn Nets guard Spencer Dinwiddie pitched an 28-team tournament with a play-in round for the final 2 seeds. Maybe the league could just send the top 4 teams in each conference into abbreviated play-off format so it could still crown a champion. So, yeah, if you have the top 4 teams in the conference, it could make sense. I don't have a problem with that. If you want to shorten everything, okay, maybe. But LeBron James has openly said from the Lakers, I just want to finish the regular season. I can understand where he's coming from. You know, you don't want to just go right to the playoffs. You want to have a rhythm. You want to get back into shape. Now, if we're going to talk about the NBA, and this is the way everything would look out, of course. Top 4 teams in the Eastern Conference would be the first seed Milwaukee. The second seed would be the Toronto Raptors. So you have the Bucks number 1, Toronto Raptors 2, Boston Celtics 3, and the Miami Heat 4. Now, if you go to the Western Conference, the top 4 teams would be number 1, the Lakers, the LA Lakers, the LA Clippers, Denver Nuggets, Utah Jazz. Here's the problem with the Western Conference. That presents a huge problem. The Western Conference, 4 through 7, is a big problem. Let's go with 4 through 6. Don't count Dallas. 4 through 6 is a problem because Utah leads by 1 game. Then you have Oklahoma City behind a game because they were playing the Utah Jazz, which was supposed to be a big important game that night. That game in Oklahoma City was huge because if Oklahoma City had won, they would have been tied for the 4th seed. Getting home court in the first round was a big deal, and that's why that game was very important that night. Yeah, we were looking forward. It was only a month away from the playoffs. The playoffs were supposed to start on April 18th. Houston is the 6th seed. Same record, 40-24, 40-24. Utah was 41-23, heading into play on March 11th. So, once again, that's a big conflict of interest. In the Eastern Conference, it's simple because Miami had a 2-game lead over the Indiana Pacers. But here was the problem with that. The Philadelphia 76ers were only a game back of the 5th seed to potentially play Miami, and Philadelphia wouldn't have to play Boston. So, there's a whole lot of controversy in that. That would be a big problem. Now, here's the next problem. What if another player gets coronavirus again? I mean, this is just completely crazy. I don't know. I mean, if LeBron James got coronavirus, how would it work out? So, it is a big mess in the NBA. There will be so many problems, and it's not like MLB where it's simple. MLB is a whole nother story on Major League Baseball, which was easier to talk about. Talking about the NBA situation, that is just something really difficult that I can't even continue to even talk about. Lastly, we're going to talk about the National Hockey League. Now, I mentioned back on the first episode of our podcast that originally on April 4th, I had tickets to go see the Islanders play the New Jersey Devils. And I always tease my friends with the New Jersey soundbite.
New Jersey.
I was supposed to see the Islanders play the Devils, and that didn't happen. So, NHL.com had an article about how could they look into this. How would Gary Bettman look into restarting everything? So, there are scenarios. This is interesting. As of now, the NHL has told players to self-quarantine through April 15th. So, according to Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly, he said in 25 of the NHL 31 markets, it would be difficult for team facilities to open to the players because of local governments, and of course, you have the stay-at-home order running through the end of April. It is large respect to the control of the timetable. We're not getting back on May 1st, right? We're not playing games on May 1st. We're not possibly even in a position to even open facilities on May 1st. The window remains open to finish the regular season in the Stanley Cup playoffs. The NHL has asked teams for arena availabilities through August and could push back the start of next season while playing a full schedule. Now, one idea was fly teams out to Europe. Now, I don't know how that's going to work out. So, that is just very sad to even bring up. I mean, the NHL looks more complicated. They're going to make a decision in May, it looks like. Same with the NBA. So I heard in the NBA they're looking into doing the May scenario, but that's how things end up in the NHL. It's possible that they're just going to go with the elected officials and they're just going to make determinations and work out with them. So, NHL, that is uncertain as well. Once again, out of all the scenarios, it looks like baseball is coming up with better plans right now than the NBA and the NHL are. Last thing I want to randomly bring up was the XFL. And the reason why I'm bringing up the XFL was we had some sad news to talk about for the XFL. I know it's a random thing to bring up here, but the XFL officially announced on April 10th that they are suspending operations and will be laying off nearly all of its staff. Therefore, the XFL has no plan to return in 2021. And what stinks about the XFL was the Guardians here in New York were actually on a win streak. Because what happened was they benched the quarterback, starting quarterback from opening day. Now, I'll get into who his name was, obviously. We had a QB named Matt McGloin. Didn't look so good, and what happened was Coach Kevin Gilbride benched him. We had a quarterback by the name of Luis Perez come in, and Luis Perez looked pretty good. Our last game was back on, I'm trying to get the schedule correctly. Correct. Our last game was back on March 7th. Correct. The last game was March 7th. I remembered. We beat the Dallas Renegades 30-12. I remembered we had a close game on Leap Day at home at MetLife Stadium. We beat the Wildcats from LA by 3 points. We didn't look so good. We only won one game in week 1 with McGloin. Week 2, we got embarrassed by DC. In week 3, we got embarrassed by St. Louis. So, McGloin was benched in week 4. Perez was put in. And the Guardians looked like they were going to be competing in March. Certainly looked like that. And the record for the Guardians in New York was 3-2. 3-2 and 3-2. Based on tiebreaker, the DC Defenders had the first seed. And the Houston Roughnecks were 5-0. The last time we had an XFL game played was back on March 8th. Dallas Renegades 2-3. LA Wildcats were 2-3. And the Dragons were 1-4 in Seattle. So you look at the math, the Guardians were really going to make a comeback. But then we knew what happened, and obviously, unfortunate what happened to the XFL. But do feel bad for everybody. I hope some of the players are going to be potentially going to the NFL maybe in the future. There are some talented players, and I hope they find luck in their future endeavors. So, therefore, this edition of the Random Podcast is over. So 2 notes I want to bring up. Number 1, on April 18th, I'm looking into simulcasting, well, not simulcasting, right, live streaming on 2K20 of NBA, the NBA playoffs. I have the bracket set up the way it was from the end of play on March 11th. So, I'll be streaming on Andy's Randomness YouTube channel on that day. And the next edition of our podcast will be posted on April 22nd. I will be predicting the 2020 NFL Draft, which will be held on April 23rd. So, that will be that episode. And then, the way things look right now after that, then episode 5 will be on May 9th. I will be predicting Money in the Bank. WWE has confirmed that they will be doing Money in the Bank at the Performance Center in Orlando, Florida. So that's good news on that end. But we're still going to have WWE no matter what happens. And I'll mention quickly, Raw and SmackDown will still be at the Performance Center in Orlando. And NXT will be held at Full Sail University once again with no spectators. So, that's how things end up, it seems, in our current coronavirus world. But, hey, something I can do about it. So, with that being all said, thank you very much for listening. And until the next one, please take care.